Loading. Welcome to Access the Animus.
Hello everyone and welcome to a new video here on Access the Animus. Today we're going to share with you a brief update and our most recent findings on the Saint Denis Mystery of the Siege of Paris DLC of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. In the video, we're going to have a look at the recent hint that was released on the Assassin's Creed Twitter account, and through that we're going to show you how we were able to crack the puzzle involving the Isu Numbers and the coordinates tied to them. Still, we're not too sure if the mystery is complete, if there's more of a cultural spin to it, or if there are still more steps that need to be taken. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking it, subscribing to our channel and turning the notifications on so you won't miss any of our future updates. And with that out of the way, let's have a look at the recent developments of the Saint Denis Mystery. So, you might remember from our first video dedicated to this mystery, which you can find in the Siege of Paris DLC of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that after our translation of the two messages decoded by the community over at the Assassin's Creed subreddit, we were kind of stuck in front of an Isu sentence and especially a set of Isu numbers. You might also remember that we converted them in their decimal equivalent, but that didn't seem to bring any new info, and actually we felt like we were stuck even more. And that kind of happened to most of the other members of the community who tried to crack this mystery, as there hadn't been any new findings for at least 10 days. So that's very likely why a new hint dedicated to the mystery was indeed released yesterday on the Assassin's Creed Twitter account. As we can see, it's not just a tweet but a quote retweet. Now the main message from the tweet said, "We see you have been making good progress on the Saint Denis Mystery, but perhaps you're missing or mistook a piece of the puzzle. Isn't a decimal 1 number, not 2? A cryptic hint without a doubt, but that indeed set us on the path to understand what to do with the numbers. Before we get into that though, we're going to show you what have been our thoughts as to how to solve the numbers part before the hint was released. In the last few days, some members of the community have tried to ask Associate Game Director and the creator of the Isu language Antoine Henry for hints connected to the puzzle, and while he didn't really spill a lot of beans, he did say that the key to solve the numbers part was to be found in these two sentences, which actually came from the decoding of the second tablet, which we translated in the first part of this video. In our first video, we translated those sentences as, "But I fear that this, however, is now invading my mind. It tells me what I don't truly or actually hear, see, or else. And I don't understand which point I have to move to the left," which on second thought could be more precisely translated to, "I don't understand why I have to move the points, plural, to the left." So, based on this, and knowing that dots or points always introduced a number in the Isu language, we thought, what if these were coordinates that you have to obtain by moving the dots to the left, and thus creating new numbers that would actually make sense as coordinates? Thus, what we did was going back to the Isu numbers and converted them just to their hexadecimal form and not its decimal one. The original numbers were 30E, F7A, 2-5 and C1D, all in the hexadecimal form. Now we tried to move some of the dots to the left in order to create some coordinates, and our best attempt was this. 30 in hex would be 48 in decimal. Then we'd have this other number, EF7A in hexadecimal, which would have been 61,306 in decimal. Then 2 in hex, which is also 2 in decimal, and then 5C1D in hex, which would have been 23,581 in decimal. Putting these together as coordinates in the decimal degrees form would have led to 48.61306 as latitude and 2.23581 as longitude. Interestingly enough, these coordinates actually led to a location in northwestern France, which is the actual area where the Siege of Paris DLC takes place. So we thought we were on a good path, but this also was leading to a random place in the real world map, south of Paris. You can bet we explored the area south of Paris in the DLC multiple times, but alas we couldn't find anything. Right after that, though, we also realized that the map of Western Francia in the DLC isn't exactly super accurate to the real one. The distances between the various locations in proportion are not perfectly precise compared to their real-world counterparts. Some rivers have a slightly different path than the real ones, which also shows how towns are not always placed exactly where they should be. Well, you get the idea. So we wondered if these are actually coordinates that identify a specific location in the real world, which we then have to go and find in the DLC's map, which is not super accurate, then the only destinations that the coordinates could lead to had to be locations that are marked on the map, otherwise the coordinates wouldn't be able to define a precise spot in the DLC map itself. So again, we tried any possible permutation of the dots to obtain 4 different numbers that could eventually lead to a location in the real world that could have a precise counterpart in the DLC's map, but again we couldn't find one. Until the AC Twitter account posted its hint. The hint said, perhaps you mistook a piece of the puzzle, and especially, isn't the decimal 1 number, not 2? So we got to think again, and we imagined that maybe instead of having the first coordinate made by 2 numbers converted individually, we could consider them as a single number, to be converted all together, and with the second dot as the comma of a decimal number. We then moved the dot from right to left, making it 30.EF7A. By putting this number, as it is written, dot included, in the converter, it would produce this absolutely long but single decimal number as mentioned in the hint, which we could use as latitude. We then did the same for the other 2 Isu numbers, which we made into a single one and then moved the dot from right to left, making it 2.5C1D in hexadecimal, which converted to the decimal system produced another absolutely long and single decimal number, which we could then use as longitude. Now, why did we move the dots in those specific places? We kind of hoped it would work like that because we were also hoping the coordinates would lead to a location in northwestern France, and from our failed attempts from the last few days, we had seen that having 30 and 2 in hexadecimal as leading coordinates would have indeed brought to northwestern France, so we did try to keep 30 and 2 as leading coordinates here too, and apparently it worked. But to be honest, without the hint we would have never gotten to the solution, because in the Isu language we always have seen that a dot introduces a number, so having 4 dots always led us to look for 4 numbers, and unless we missed it, we couldn't really find any real hint in-game that could lead us to consider those as 2 entities instead of 4. Even the reference to moving the dots always caused us to think we just needed to create 4 new numbers and not 2. Who knows, maybe we are just too slow, or the puzzle was a bit too obscure, and without this new recent clue, we probably would have never gotten to the solution, but whatever the case, here it is. Coupling together the insanely long coordinates brings to a very specific location, that is, drumroll, the Saint Denis Abbey itself, which is as cool as it is a bit anticlimactic, as this is actually where the mystery started in the first place. More specifically, the super precise coordinates seem to lead to the center of the current Saint Denis church, but of course they could also be there to just point to the church as a whole. So of course we got back in the DLC to the Saint Denis Abbey. We got at its center on the roof and on the ground, and we even tried to see if the center of the abbey coincided with the crypt we had already found, which of course it doesn't. We scanned with eagle vision every surface of the basilica because remember the Isu sentence said they see it, they activate it, but all of that exploring pretty much led to nothing. After a while, we also checked back on the hint by the AC Twitter account, and as we mentioned earlier, it was a quote retweet, but not a random one. It is indeed a retweet of a tweet from August the 12th by the French Centre des Monuments Nationaux, that is the Center of the National Monuments of France, which is an organization that preserves, restores, and manages nearly 100 of the most famous monuments in the country. Their tweet pretty much said, "Experience the most epic battle in the history of Vikings. The new expansion of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, The Siege of Paris, releases today. A well-hidden surprise awaits for the bravest among you." Of course, that was a reference to the Saint Denis Mystery, and little did we know, after a brief research we found out that the Saint Denis Cathedral is actually one of the monuments that the Center of the National Monuments is indeed taking care of today. So we did go on their website, and more specifically on the website of the Saint Denis Cathedral, and we suggest you to do it too, even to just find out about some of the marvelous landmarks and monuments in France, but alas we couldn't find any more clues to move on. Maybe you guys will be better than us with that? Also, there is a chance that while this mystery circles back to Saint Denis and is also tied to the Center of the National Monuments, maybe it is indeed oriented into drawing more attention to the actual cathedral and its cultural value as a monument, but it also holds a meaning within the Assassin's Creed franchise and its lore. Or maybe there is another step that should be taken in-game that we still have to figure out to actually get to the first civilization vault located underneath the Saint Denis Cathedral. Who knows, maybe that could lead to find the Head of Saint Denis artifact we already saw in Assassin's Creed Unity. After all, we haven't used all the hints at our disposal yet. Well, we guess that only time will tell. But until then, thank you for watching and we'll see you in our next video.